Study Session 4, Learning Disabilities. Introduction. In this study session, you will explore the field of learning disabilities and the peculiar problems associated with children in this disability category. We shall present to you the nature of problems in learning disabilities, historical background, definitions, peculiar characteristics, specific types, and educational challenges of learning disabilities. We shall also attempt to discuss classroom management strategies for learning disabilities. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to 1. Discuss the historical background to learning disabilities. 2. Describe learning disabilities. 3. Point out the characteristics of learning disabilities. 4. Distinguish between the different types of learning disabilities. 5. Outline the causes of learning disabilities. 6. Highlight the procedure for identifying learning disabilities. And 7. Present effective management strategies for children with learning disabilities. Historical background to learning disabilities. Learning disabilities is one of the fields in special education that is historically significant. The category of children were identified long after other categories of children with disabilities like mental retardation, visual impairment, hearing impairment, physical handicaps, etc. have been already organized in schools and receiving functional services. Historically, the discovery of children with associated symptoms of learning disabilities started when teachers continuously reported persistent academic failures of some children in their classrooms. Such children were not able to learn what the teachers taught despite sound teaching. These children were reported to have normal growth and sound health. When such cases were brought to hospitals, medical doctors could not pinpoint any health problems. Later on, scanning of the brain revealed different kinds of brain abnormalities. They were then described as children with brain disorder, neurological impairment, and perceptual handicaps. It was later in 1963 that the term learning disabilities was accepted as the official and professional term for the field. Children with learning disabilities have problems generally associated with poor learning in academic and social skills. Definition of learning disabilities. To enable you understand more about stages of conceptualization of activities in the field, we shall explore some of the definitions or descriptions as they were given historically. These various definitions will be discussed below with reference to the authors. You need to take note of the key words in each description or definition. Kirk, 1963, identified learning disabilities as a disorder or delayed development in one or more of the processes of speech, oral language, reading, spelling, writing, and arithmetic. This disorder may result from a possible cerebral dysfunction or emotional or behavioral disturbance, and not from other areas of exceptionalities. Batman, 1965, defined learning disabilities as a manifestation of an educational significant discrepancy between the estimated intellectual potential and the actual intellectual performance related to basic disorder in the learning processes. It may or may not be accompanied by any demonstrable central nervous system dysfunction that is not secondary to generalized retardation, educational or cultural deprivation, observed emotional disturbance, or sensory loss. Berteman's description clearly suggests that there is the presence of a disorder which brings about a disparity in the performance of children with learning disabilities and other normal children. Gallagher, 1966, posits that learning disabilities as the characteristics traits found in children that manifest developmental disparity significant enough, about 4 years or more, has to require the instructional program special education appropriate to the nature and level of the deviation in the development process. Johnson and McElbost, 1967, described learning disabilities as a neurological dysfunction or brain impairment, and altered process, and not generalized incapacity to learn. Invariably, they suggest that children with such learning problems are considered as having psychoneurological learning disabilities. The implication of this is that the behavior must have been disturbed due to the dysfunction of the brain. The nature and diversity of learning disabilities have evoked further comment. Lerner described children with learning disabilities from a psychological point of view, attempting to capture the observed confusing nature of this disorder. He stated that although children with learning disabilities are not blind, they do not see, they do not hear, even though they are not deaf. Neither are they able to develop normally or learn in any normal process, though they do not have mental retardation. You should note that all the above definitions or descriptions have different dimensions of emphasis that made it difficult to bring the observed difficulties of the children under one umbrella. Consideration of some harmonized definition. These definitions are more professional in outlook. They were developed by a group of people who were commissioned by government agencies, associations made up by parents of children with related problems, and professionals from related disciplines. These definitions, at one point or the other, tried to look at the common features of problems associated with learning in order to harmonize them into one platform. Harmonized definition of learning disabilities include the ones provided by federal definition, National Joint Committee on Learning Disabilities, NJCLD. Federal definition of learning disabilities. Education for All Handicapped Act defined learning disabilities as a specific learning disability. It means a disorder in one or more of the basic psychological processes involved in understanding or in using languages spoken or written, which may manifest itself in an imperfect ability to listen, think, speak. The term includes such conditions as perceptual handicaps, brain injury, minimal brain dysfunction, dyslexia, and developmental aphasia. The term does not include children who have learning problems, which are primarily the result of visual, hearing, or motor handicaps, of mental retardation, of emotional disturbance, or of environment, cultural, or economic disadvantage. Definition by NJCLD. NJCLD defined learning disability as a general term that refers to a heterogeneous group of disorders manifested by significant difficulties in the acquisition and use of listening, speaking, reading, writing, reasoning, or mathematical abilities. These disorders are intrinsic to the individual and presumed to be due to central nervous system dysfunction. Problems in self-regulatory behavior, social perception, and social interaction may exist with learning disabilities, but not by themselves constitute a learning disability. Even though a learning disability may occur concomitantly with other handicapping conditions, for example, sensory impairment, mental retardation, social and emotional disturbance, or environment influences such as cultural differences, insufficient or inappropriate instructions, psychogenic factors, it is not the result of those conditions or influences. An analysis of these definitions shows us that a child has specific learning disabilities under the following categories. 1. The student fails to achieve at the proper age the required ability level in one or more of several specific areas when provided with appropriate learning experience. 2. The student has a severe disparity between supposed achievement and intellectual ability levels in one or more of the 7 areas: oral expression, listening, comprehension, etc. mentioned above. Note: you should note that this harmonized definition of learning disabilities directs the operational basis of determining who actually is eligible, that is, rarely qualified to receive attention under learning disability services. Characteristics of learning disabilities. We have looked at the definition of learning disabilities. We shall now examine some basic characteristics of learning disabilities. We like to draw your attention to the fact that the characteristics of learning disabilities are by no means identification criteria for learning disabilities. We will highlight some common characteristics and give brief explanation of each of them. You should note that it may not be possible or easy to bring out all the characteristics of human behavior, bearing in mind that no two individuals are the same. However, there are some characteristics that are common to children with learning disabilities. Observable behavioral characteristics of children with learning disabilities include the following. 1. Hyperactivity. 2. Withdrawal Syndrome. 3. Emotional instability. 4. Attention deficit. 5. Clumsiness or awkwardness. 6. Low frustration tolerance. 7. Perseveration. 8. Acting on impulse. 9. Perceptual motor impairments. 10. Poor cognitive information processing. 11. Poor academic achievement. And 12. Differential Intelligence. 1. Hyperactivity. Majority of children with learning disabilities are hyperactive. They seem restless at all times. Children with learning disabilities find it difficult to remain at a particular sport or engage in a particular activity for a long time. Hyperactivity consists in excessive physical movement and shifting of attention from one thing to the other at very short intervals. Hyperactive movements prevent such children from learning, and they can also distract other children in the classroom. Hyperactive children fidget a lot, and there is a general involvement in unconsciousness active movements in hyperactive children. In the classroom, they appear to be busier than their peers, and this is at a level that will attract the teachers as well as their peers concerned. 2. Withdrawal Syndrome. Some children with learning disabilities withdraw themselves from others in the same environment. Withdrawal syndrome is the habit or attitude of isolating or distancing from others. When this becomes a regular occurrence, then as assumed a problematic dimension, it is a problem. Children displaying such characteristics may refuse to join others in carrying out any activity in and outside the classroom. Such a child may doze off while teaching or learning is going on in the classroom. 3. Emotional instability. Emotional instability refers to an unbalanced emotional status. Some children with learning disabilities exhibit emotional outbursts at unexpected times. They react negatively even when the situation does not warrant it. They display temper tantrums. One moment they may flare up, the next moment they are sober or cheerful. Somebody meeting them for the first time would definitely conclude that their behavior is unusual. 4. Attention deficit or short-time attention problems. Children with learning disabilities have short attention span. They are not able to listen or pay attention to a particular task or the teacher for a long time. They may not focus on the task or contents of instruction for a long time when a lesson is being presented. Every lesson may look cumbersome and appear impossible to them. The consequence of this is that they get easily distracted. Any little noise in or outside the classroom is enough to shift their focus away from what they are being taught. In such a case, the teacher is likely to call on the child continuously in order to redirect and bring back his or her attention to what is being taught. 5. Clumsiness and awkwardness. This is another characteristic that marks out children with learning disabilities. Being clumsy is an indication of a poor partial perception and orientation. Some children with learning disabilities are usually not always smart. They can easily break up things around them at home and at school. There is always an inability to be mindful of objects around them. They do not know how to handle or take proper care of things, both at school and at home. They always spill things on the floor, knock or eat their food against the table or chair consistently, etc. Children with learning disabilities can easily destroy things, even though they may show remorse when this happens. This makes them to be seen as destructive individuals. 6. Low frustration tolerance. Abandoning a task halfway is always easy for children with learning disabilities. They are easily frustrated. They lose hope and give up trying an academic task or other skills-related task easily. They do not show the strong will to try more or engage in regular practice in order to master a skill or task. Getting fed up easily with something occurs all the time. That is why they are not pushing forward in the classroom, and this also occurs even at home. 7. Preservation. This is also referred to as attention fixation. That is, focusing attention on a particular task longer than is necessary. Children with learning disabilities often fix attention on trying to perform a particular task for a very long time without trying to let go. They may be doing it wrongly, but still insist on continuing on the task. An example of attention fixation or preservation is when a child scribes rough lines on his or her book, or trying to write something, and he or she does this rigorously, scribbling over and over again without wishing to stop. Even when the teacher tries to stop the activity, the child would insist on carrying on. 8. Acting on impulse. Children with learning disability often act on impulse. Acting on impulse occurs when one reacts to a stimuli without having any thought over it. Impulsive movements or reactions may appear too sudden to people around. At times, children react in this way to their peers without any reason for such. An example of this is assuming a child wishes to write a letter A in the exercise book. After many trials and the letter could not be formed successfully, the child can just tear his exercise book to pieces, throw away the pencil, and even break the pencil into 2 or more pieces. This child can be without even looking at the teacher or anyone else. 9. Perpetual motor impairments. Children with learning disabilities have problems of motor in coordination. They experience poor gross motor and fine motor coordination. This manifests poor eye, hand, and general movement coordination. They may find it difficult to write or to copy things from the chalkboard into the exercise book. Most times, it appears as if their eyes' wise is harmony with the hand. In such cases, there will be an obvious poor performance of the task assigned. Children with such problems may not be able to catch balls in the air or actively engage in sporting activities. Perceptual problems can greatly retard the progress of children with learning disabilities in the classroom. Where a child is not able to perceive letters properly as a whole, but sees them as separate entities, it becomes very difficult to pronounce or read. Cognitive information processing. Cognitive information processing relates to the way an individual acquires, retains, and manipulates information. This manifests in various ways in the processing of visual and auditory information. Children with learning disabilities have problems of memorization. They find it difficult to recall past lessons or skills the teacher taught them. This is why they are described as having short attention and memory span. They generally perform poorly on all memory tasks. They lack organizational skills, and they also find it difficult to develop an active learning style and strategies to direct their own learning as a result of a lack of metacognitive functions. 11. Poor academic achievement. Children with learning disabilities have problems of low and very poor achievement in school. Poor academic achievement is one of the reasons for the creation and development of this field. Anyone would know that something is definitely wrong somewhere. Not only are they performing below their peers, they also achieve below their potentials at very significant level. This could be in any subject area or in all areas. 12. Differential intelligence. Children with learning disabilities generally are described as having above average or average intelligence. This is a major differentiating factor between the mildly retarded children and the learning disabled. Note, children with learning disabilities also exhibit secondary behavioral disorders. These behaviors are not specific to any particular level of intellectual functioning, that is, whether below average or above average intellectual level. There is also an identified variability between areas of functioning in both intellectual and performance ability. The emphasis here is that children with learning disabilities can perform or carry out various skills at different levels. They can be very good in a craft and be poor in painting, etc. This is referred to as intra-individual variability. You must always remember that these are not to be relied on as the sole identification process. The characteristics are only a behavioral manifestation of children who face problems associated with learning disabilities. Identification of children with learning disabilities cannot be based only on behavioral characteristics. So, before any conclusion could be made, a comprehensive assessment of the individual, that is, child or adult, should be carried out. Types of learning disabilities. We have described the behavioral symptoms found among children and youth with learning disabilities. You should by now be able to mention those behaviors one after the other. It is important for us to look at some of the specific types of disorders in learning disabilities. Specific orders in learning disabilities, irrespective of behavioral symptoms, can be grouped into specific types of disorders. These various subtypes of learning disabilities have already been examined earlier under the harmonized earlier in this study session. They include the following. 1. Oral language difficulties. 2. Reading. 3. Writing and spelling. And 4. Arithmetic. Causes of learning disabilities. It is important to let you know that all the learning disabilities, irrespective of the specific types, have been traced to some clusters of causes. Due to the diversity of these causes, they will be discussed under the following subheadings. 1. Neurological causes. 2. Maturational delay. 3. Biochemical imbalances. 4. Genetic causes. 5. Environmental causes. 6. Other unknown causes. 1. Neurological causes. The history of early research findings related the major causes of learning disabilities to brain injury or neurological dysfunction. Since the evolution of this field, majority of the professionals have imputed brain damage as the main cause of learning disabilities in an individual. This is visible in definitions of learning disabilities as a neurological dysfunction or impairment in the brain. Brain damage can occur during the prenatal, natal, or postnatal stages. It could happen due to accident or any physical trauma that directly affects the brain. At the natal stage, that is during birth, brain damage can occur when there is a lack of oxygen anoxia, misuse of forceps, resus incapability, that is R to H factor, and so on. Incidents like shock and disease can inflict neurological damages in an individual, whether young or old. Learning disabilities can set in as a result of this. Brain damage or neurological dysfunction is, however, only a presumed cause of learning disability. The actual cause might remain undetected even after thorough assessments and examination have been carried out. 2. Maturational delay. Maturational delay is connected to neurological imbalance. Maturational delay occurs where a child does not develop some behavioral characteristics at the time he or she is supposed to do so. An example is when a child fails to talk until he or she is 2 years old. Maturational delay can occur if the brain or the entire neurological system delays in developing. Some types of learning disabilities faced by some individuals have been traced to delays in the maturational process. Generally, most children with learning disabilities have immature behaviors when compared to other children in the same age group. This is a strong indication that maturational delay plays a major role in the causes of learning disabilities whenever they occur. 3. Biochemical imbalances. Biochemical imbalances have also been speculated as the causes of learning disabilities. Research has shown that hyperactivity and learning problems encountered by children with learning disabilities could be caused by artificial food colorings and flavorings contained in most foods children eat. He therefore suggested that such children should be placed on special diets that contained no artificial substances. Though it has not been sufficiently substantiated, some research has shown that withdrawal of artificial food colorings and flavorings have been reported to have reduced hyperacidity to a significant level. 4. Genetic causes. Heredity has been found to be one of the major factors causing learning disabilities. Some children with learning disabilities inherited the trait from their parents. This is common where there is the occurrence of one genetic abnormality or the other. In families where one of the parents or both have learning disabilities, one of their children is likely to inherit the trait, especially where the cause of the parent's learning disability is genetically inclined. 5. Environmental causes. The environment generally implants certain behavioral influences on children. Environmental influences can be measured or detected by the outward behaviors of individuals both at home and at school. Children pick up some forms of unwanted behavior from their environment. Because of this, children misbehave and become stubborn, lazy, dirty, play trancy, become very destructive, and so on. This could be a direct influence of the environment. Lack of proper teaching techniques and methods can also include learning disabilities in children. Lovett listed emotional disturbance, lack of motivation, and poor instruction as direct consequences of environmental influences. Most children with learning disabilities exhibit behavior disorder, and some are not easily motivated. Other environmental influences include lead poisoning, fluorescent lighting, food additives, radiational stress, and unshielded television tubes, smoking, drinking, drug consumption, ill health, parental abuse and neglect, cultural differences, poor funding of education, poor nutrition, and so on. 6. Unknown causes. Some children's learning difficulties may not be traced to any known cause. In such cases, the children may have a normal development and maturation, but may still experience poor cognitive achievement. Usually in such groups, no deficiencies will be found except in one or two areas of basic academic or social skills. Note, the causes of learning disabilities have no direct relationship with their intervention. Thus, it is only a minute part of identification procedures. Identification of learning disabilities. Procedural identification of learning disabilities must be carried out before effective intervention can start. We highlight the steps involved in identification of learning disabilities in Figure 4.1. Placement, evaluation, clinical observation, diagnostic assessment, screening. Challenges of learning disabilities. 1. Challenges of learning disabilities to educators. There is need for you to understand that the diverse characteristics of the population with learning disabilities induce diverse problems for children and youth in a regular classroom. They generally have poor academic achievement and present a lot social emotional problems that are quite difficult to handle in the regular classroom. Thus, the different characteristics of learners and their learning styles should be taken into consideration by the teacher. 2. Challenges of learning disabilities to specialists. Apart from academic qualification, a learning disabilities specialist should have a clear understanding of the following. 1. There is need to cater for the diverse needs of all the students in a class. Teachers should carry out a general class assessment before teaching each child. 2. The different characteristics of the learners and their learning styles should be taken into consideration in order to ensure that every student reach his or her maximum potential. 3. There is need for the teacher to see that the learning style and communication style of each student is taken into consideration when evaluating or teaching him or her. 3. Strategies of overcoming the challenges of learning disabilities. Teachers of children with learning disabilities must be able to carry out the following duties. 1. Assessments of the behavior and academic difficulties of learners in this group before teaching. 2. Planning appropriate task-specific lessons for different types of subcategories of learners. 3. Conduct explicit teaching that is effectively targeted at reducing the impact of the difficulties on individual learners. 4. Manage different kinds of behavior problems associated with learning disabilities. Advice for learning disability teachers. To be able to work effectively with individuals with learning disabilities, the following issues are necessary for effective teaching. 1. Make up your mind to work successfully with individuals with learning disabilities. 2. See every case or individual as teachable and hope for success. 3. Be ready to devote time to study your client. Be a good listener and watcher. 4. Encourage the learners to put in effort in their study. Do not insult or discourage them. Rather, be friendly and supportive. 5. Teach students how to understand different learning processes and strategies. 6. Encourage group discussion making and consequences. 7. Provide opportunities for the student to be involved in the development of personal learning outcomes. 8. Build students' self-esteem through the establishment of positive classroom management. 9. Use a range of teaching techniques and incorporate the use of a range of appropriate technologies. 10. Build your teaching upon the student's experience and skills and leave gaps. 11. Use varying assessment procedures in recognition of individual differences. 12. Teach elementary organization skills and processes. 13. Use simple assignment techniques to promote students' organizational skills. 14. The period of lesson should be shortened to accommodate the short attention span of the individuals with learning disabilities. And 15. Learning tasks of whatever nature should be within the interest of the individuals. Study session summary. In this study session, we have examined learning disabilities. We thus gave a good background to learning disabilities, definition of learning disabilities, and also explained some basic characteristics of children with learning disabilities. We also touched on the fundamental causes of learning disability, how they can be prevented, as well as the strategies for countering the challenges of learning disabilities. That ends study session 4. Thanks for listening.